and roll with the program. So we are recording, and good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. My name is Tara Feiner, and I am the Director of Jewish Family Services in Dayton, Ohio. And on behalf of Jewish Family Services, which is chaired by Michelle Dritz, and our program committee, which is currently chaired by Helene Gordon and Marianne Bernstein, welcome to Our Pets and What to Expect as We Leave Our Homes and Venture Out with Dr. Denise Starr. We're very excited that Dr. Starr is with us today. But before we do the official welcome and intro, just some really quick housekeeping. A note that we make this presentation available for educational purposes. This is not specific medical advice for you or your fur baby. So it's an educational resource and should be treated as that. And how we're going to manage the event is we're going to mute everybody for now. At the end, we can unmute for questions, but we all know that we don't want our secrets heard, or our fur babies might visit us during the session, and we want to make sure we can hear Dr. Starr. So we are going to have everybody muted, and that's really easy to do. You can mute yourself either in the bottom left of your screen. Sometimes it's the top if it's an iPad. There's a little microphone. If it's green, you're active. If there's a red and if there's a line through it, you're muted. So you can do that at the bottom. Sometimes it's at the top or within your square. Your camera works the same way. It's up to you whether or not you want to be live and we can see you, or if you want to have your camera off. It's usually a button right next to your microphone. If there is no line through it, we can see you. If I click on that little button, you can't see me. There's a line through my camera. I'm not visible. So that is 100% personal preference, up to you. We love to see you, but it's a personal preference. Just remember, please, though, if you need to take any kind of a bio break, leave your technology behind and have the screen off. All right, we all know that lesson. We're going to hold questions to the end, but if you want to put your question down so you don't forget it, feel free to enter it in the chat box. So you should have a chat box somewhere on the bottom of your screen. Some people it is at the top if it's a tablet or an iPad. You just click on the little chat. It looks like a little thought bubble. And you want to make sure it goes to everyone so we can see it. You can type your question, but you do have to make sure you hit enter for it to actually post. So I actually just type the word yes in my chat box and hit enter. That's how that works. We'll also be able to raise hands at the end and have a conversation. So that is the bulk of the logistics, and we are going to pin the speakers. This is going to be an interview format. So I will pin Dr. Starr and me as we chat throughout the session. Now I have the privilege of introducing our speaker. So Dr. Denise Starr is originally from Lima. Is it Lima or Lima, Dr. Starr? Lima. I'm fairly new to Dayton, 7 years, and I still don't know. So thank you, Lima. She graduated summa cum laude with a Bachelor of Science degree in microbiology from The Ohio State University. I might not be from here, but I know you have to add the
that
first.
part.
I got that down. And she also studied there at the College of Veterinary Medicine. She joined the staff at the Northmont Animal Clinic in June 2000 after receiving her doctorate of veterinary medicine. Her professional interests include cardiology and preventative medicine, and she has a special fondness of pocket pets. We were just talking about that as people were coming on. It was a totally new term for me. I've never heard pocket pets. It's a perfect descriptor, especially rats. Her other great love besides veterinary medicine is Ohio State football. And I know there are a lot of people that is a big, big passion for around here. And other hobbies include kayaking, hiking, and scrapbooking. And she has 6 cats, maybe one of which we'll visit later. As we go through the program, we are going to show a slideshow that we have of all of your pets that were shared. And so we'll see them in a little bit. But I do want to bring on Dr. Starr, who came to us. So many people on here already know her and are thrilled to have her with us, and we're really excited. So you can join me in welcoming Dr. Starr. You can either clap using your reaction buttons at the bottom. You can do jazz hands, clap, whatever works for you. So welcome.
Thank
so
you.
Dr. Starr, thank you for being with us today. And when we think back to January 2020, even going back a year and a half, life was normal or whatever our routines were. Many of us were not home all day. Our pets had established routines. We had established routines. All was good. And then March 2020 happened. I call my 2020 the black hole. And in order for us to protect ourselves as well as our community, we had the stay-at-home order and we were staying home and isolating to prevent the spread of COVID. So for almost a year, many of us were primarily home, maybe running out a little bit to do a quick errand or two safely, but we were home and our fur babies got used to us being home much more than we used to be. And now with the prevalence of the vaccine, we're going out more, maybe returning to work, maybe traveling, going out with friends. We're just not home as much. So Dr. Starr, we were really hoping that you could talk a little bit about how well our pets adapt to changes in routine, maybe going from established routines like we had pre-COVID to when we are home for long periods of time, not just daily, but over time. And then what happens to routines and behaviors maybe as then we change and are home less often.
Sure. So, the joke that we always made at the clinic when the shutdown started with COVID was, COVID, your cat hates it and your dog loves it, because suddenly everybody's at home and the cats are like, what is going on here? You ruined my life. And the dogs are like, this is awesome. Everybody's home. Like, so, I think the biggest thing, there was always concerns at the beginning of the pandemic, because there were incidental reports of pets testing positive for COVID. And there was this great fear that if your pet could, if you could transmit it to your pet or they could transmit it back to you, were we going to have this influx of people abandoning their pets at shelters out of fear and things like that. And luckily that did not, take place. And we found the opposite. Everybody was home and the shelters just got emptied out. Everybody was home. They had nothing to do. And they're like, I'm, bored. I need a pet. And so they adopted a puppy or a kitten or, an adult cat. So it was great for the shelters and all these animals came home. But, animals really pick up on our routines and kind of adjust their life schedules to what our schedules are, and they get very adapted to what our normal day-to-day is. And some do better than others, just like some people are more flexible than others about things. But any change to your routine can cause anxiety in your pets. And they all exhibit that in different ways. The big concern when people were home, the dogs were very happy because dogs tend to always want to be with us and they're people pleasers and they just want to be, wherever everybody else is. And so we found a lot of our patients that already had anxiety issues, they were doing great. And, they, a lot of the owners took them off their medicine because the dogs were doing well because they were home all the time. Whereas some of our cats that have anxiety issues did less well, because people were home all the time, especially the kids, because, love kids, but kids are loud and they're kind of rambunctious and, the cats are kind of like, I want my peace and quiet. And now there's just all this mayhem in my house and I'm stressed out and I'm going to go pee in the corner. So we found a little bit of an increase with our cats with anxiety issues due to COVID, a lot more kind of litter box issues and things like that. So we had to kind of work with people to do things to kind of give the cats their own space, whereas the dogs, were super happy. Now that everybody's going back to work, we have the opposite problem. The cats are like, fantastic, I have my life back. So, and the dogs are more like, where are you going? You're never coming back. I've been abandoned. Life is over, and so they're having a lot more. And especially people who got puppies or dogs during the pandemic, especially puppies, because they're young. You couldn't really socialize them because you couldn't go anywhere. And so the concern is we're going to see a lot more anxiety issues with those dogs as people kind of leave the house, because one, they're not well socialized, so they're a little more fearful in general. They were so used to a routine where someone was home all the time, and now it's, with someone even gone for a few hours, they think their life is over, and the world has ended. So it's kind of as always with cats and dogs, it's always backwards. Cats, whatever cats like, dogs hate. Whatever dogs love, cats hate. So but yeah, so that's kind of the issues going on. And so, as far as like anxiety issues in cats versus dogs, cats cats are always a little bit more independent than dogs, so they have less anxiety issues than dogs in general. But the big thing with cats that you would see at home is to know that they have anxiety. It's litter box issues. Going outside the box is always a problem, especially spraying. If they're squatting and going, then that can a lot of times just be a medical issue or a litter box issue. But if they're spraying on vertical surfaces, that's a sign that you have a cat that has some anxiety. And then excessive grooming is the other big thing with cats. They get the bald belly, or their tail isn't bald because they've chewed all their hair out. So those are a sign of anxiety in cats. Dogs, they have the obvious kind of symptoms that people notice: the trembling, pacing, panting, destroying things. They get chronic diarrhea, or they vomit frequently, sometimes with anxiety. And then there's more subtle symptoms, a dog that yawns a lot or is excessively licking their lips constantly. Those are kind of more subtle signs of anxiety in your dog. It doesn't necessarily mean just because they do some of those things, because a lot of dogs will pant for a variety of reasons. It doesn't necessarily mean they have anxiety, but when you have that in combination with some of the other things, those are all signs that your dog's a little stressed out.
So what can we do? So cats, it sounds like were more anxious when we were home,
Mhm.
and that they might have no problem adjusting with when we leave.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's accurate or not, that, with that remedy itself.
Yeah, cats, separation anxiety is not a big problem with cats. Cats, if as long as you give a cat their space, so they have their own space to go, their litter box is kind of in a quiet, area set aside where there's not a lot of foot traffic and things. It's not in the laundry room where the buzzer's going off while they're taking a poo, and they freak out. And cats, if you give them space and you give them some toys and some things to do, give a cat tree to play on, they're usually pretty good with stuff. Dogs, tend to require a little bit more attention than cats. They're just not quite as self-sufficient as a species. So yeah.
So what can we do to help our dogs? So for example, when we were planning this, a colleague of ours said, when you said you were doing this session about what we can do to help our pets and what we can expect as we're leaving the home, I thought, really, is that needed? But then she went on to say that the first day that both she and her husband left the house at the same time for the day for work in a year and a half, she came home and her dog was trembling.
Yeah.
And it was just a major adjustment that they weren't anticipating. Is there something that we can do if we have dogs to help mitigate and reduce their anxiety and get them used to new routines again?
Sure. So there's several different things you can do, and it all kind of depends on the level of your dog's anxiety, because some of them kind of have just mild, and those are much easier to deal with. And then you have the very destructive dogs, that will just tear the house apart when you're gone for 5 minutes. So for like mild anxiety, things like leaving the radio on when you're gone, or the television, either on like a nature program, or leave the radio on like classical music or something like that. That's kind of soothing. Um, some dogs, just like me, I constantly have the TV on whether I'm watching it or not. It's just background noise. I just can't stand the house to be completely quiet. So some dogs are like that. So just having that can sometimes help. If you have a dog that's not destructive, like won't chew it up and eat it, an old t-shirt that you have worn but not washed, leaving that out for them so your scent is on it, so that they can sleep with that or play with it or whatever they want. That works well for a lot of dogs. I don't know if you can see this. You can get these different toys that are like reward toys. So you can put treats down in there or their food, and they can play with it, and it'll come out the hole. And so that gives them something to do while you're gone, and so they're not bored. You can get those Kong toys they're like these rubber toys that have this big hole in the middle. You can fill that with peanut butter or their treats. You can even put it in the freezer so the peanut butter freezes, because it'll take them hours to get it out, and give that to them so they have something to do while you're gone. Things like that. Dogs that have kind of, if your dog is crate trained, using the crate, and even if it's not crate trained, getting a crate and giving them like a safe space, because some there's just too much for them to be in the house by themselves, and they just don't know what to do with themselves. So giving them kind of a confined space that's their space, in training them properly to understand that crate is a safe space. So because a lot of dogs hate the crate initially because they don't like to be confined, but if you leave them out, they get destructive. But there's different kinds of crates. You can get kind of those wired that look like a cage crate. I don't particularly like those because I've seen a lot of dogs pull those apart and destroy them and break their teeth in the process. But there's those molded plastic airline crates that are kind of more solid, and putting a blanket over the top of it so it's kind of dark in there. So some just want a dark space to go to and kind of rest and stuff. And you can put their toys in there, and throw like a high value treat in there before you go. So a piece of cheese or pepperoni or some treat that they really really like, and they only get that treat when they go in the crate. So you don't give that to them under normal circumstances, so that they know that, well, when I have to go in my crate, it's a very positive thing. I get this great treat. Sometimes that helps, but the crates, especially leaving them open all the time, so that the dog, even if your home has anxiety, that they know they can go in there and be by themselves, and just kind of calm down and have their own space, and that no one, and you have to teach like the kids or everyone else in the family that if the dog is in the crate, you don't bother the dog, you just let him be in there, and he'll come out when he's ready. That helps for some, and that works well if you have a young dog and a puppy to start off in that regard. An older dog, sometimes that's hard, if they've never been in a crate, trying to put them in a crate, they freak out. But sometimes just confining them to one room of the house, with a baby gate or something, so they don't have a full roam of the house where they just kind of will pace back and forth from room to room looking for people. Sometimes that helps kind of give them more defined space as well, in those types of things. And then the dogs that have really severe anxiety that get destructive, those dogs, you really have to pay attention to what keys them up, because their anxiety will start long before you leave the house. Like, so they'll see you go through. We all have our routines when we get ready to go. We put our shoes on, grab our keys, fix our hair or whatever, and their anxiety will start ramping up long before. And so what you have to do is desensitize them to your routine, that not every time you pick your keys up means that you're leaving and they're going to be by themselves. So we have people do is kind of start through your routine like you would normally do during the day, and kind of watch the dog. If you start seeing the dog start licking its lips or trembling or showing any of those signs of anxiety, then you just stop and you just go back to do something else until the dog settles down. And then as soon as the dog settles down, you start doing it again. And you just kind of slowly have to work that up little by little, where you grab your keys and then you just go sit on the couch and watch TV for 10 minutes, so that they learn that every time that happens, nothing bad happens, to them. And then when they exhibit signs of where they've kind of settled at that point, then you can give them like a high value treat, to say this, you want to reward the behavior that you want to see. So when they're calm, you give them a treat. I think that this mistake a lot of people make is when the dog gets anxious and starts panting and pawing and, whining, then they want to go, oh, it's okay, and pet the dog, you're fine. And what you've done is you've positively reinforced their anxiety. And so that's the opposite of what we want to do. We want to positively reinforce them being calm. So you don't want to perpetuate that anxiety. So what you do, instead of trying to calm them yourself, you just stop what you're doing and just sit and be calm and do something different until they settle down. So you let them kind of calm themselves down instead of you trying to calm them down, because what they see is they got attention because they acted that way. And that just reinforces the next time you do it that they're going to be even more anxious. So does that make sense?
It does. And that's a really interesting, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
That you're positively reinforcing anxiety if you try to calm them on the spot. It's a really interesting point, and not something I had thought about before. It's a lot of great tips and things to watch for with our animals, and how to slowly perhaps be thoughtful about the changes that are coming down the pike and trying to help them work through their anxiety.
Yeah.
Are there particular breeds that tend to have more anxiety than others?
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's ever owned a Chihuahua, you just bought yourself a 10-pound ball of anxiety wrapped in fur. Pretty much, they live in a constant state of anxiety. But certain breeds, like the herding breeds, so Australian Shepherds, Australian cattle dogs, it's not necessarily that those dogs are prone to anxiety as a breed. It's just that they are very high energy dogs that need a lot of stimulation. They need a lot of exercise. And when they go to a home where someone works 10 hours a day and they're by themselves, like they don't know what to do. So it's always, breed research is always really important when you're thinking about getting a dog, because if you're gone 10 hours a day and the dog's going to be in a crate, an Australian Shepherd is not the right dog for you. So, because it will eventually destroy your house, because it doesn't know what they need room to run. They need walked every day. They need constant stimulation. They're great dogs if you have kids. They will probably try to herd your kids through the yard, but because kids have high energy, they run the energy off. But, as opposed to like a Basset Hound, where it's like, they sleep 20 hours a day anyway. They're pretty chill dogs. So, but certain breeds, like the working breeds, so German Shepherds, we see a lot of anxiety in German Shepherds. And I think it's just because people don't realize how much work those dogs are, like as far as they need exercise constantly. and they don't realize that that's what they need to do. And so the dog is home and it's not getting stimulated and it's not getting exercised, and it just doesn't know what to do with all that excess energy. And so it manifests in destructive behavior and in anxiety.
It's interesting. So just that mismatch between a
Yeah.
breed's behavior and characteristics and your own lifestyle can create that too, separate
Yeah.
from any kind of routines. It's a really important consideration. And I actually think I want to come back to that in a second, especially with some questions about some of the COVID pets. But with regard, we talked about breeds and lifestyle. Are there any other factors that come into play when we start thinking about stress and anxiety our fur babies might exhibit?
If anxiety always worsens over time, so if you have a dog that's young and has anxiety, mild anxiety issues, it might not be a huge deal at the moment, where it's just more of an annoyance than a big problem where they're destroying the house when you're gone. But if you don't deal with that at the time and adjust, that behavior is only going to get worse over time, and to the point where they will get very destructive. And then it's much, much harder to deal with. And then the other thing is, you know, our pets live so much longer than they used to now, especially our toy breed dogs. I mean, it's not unusual for us to have poodles that come in that are like 18 years old. And it's senility issues are a big problem in those older pets that live into their late teens. And, you know, a lot of them, they go deaf, they can't hear anymore. A lot of the small breed dogs cataracts, so they can't see anymore, and they just have just a decline in their cognitive function, and that can cause great anxiety too. And that can be a difficult thing to deal with, because there's not a lot that I can or we can offer as far as medical treatment for cognitive decline, you know, and senility issues. But a lot of those older dogs sometimes benefit from just mild anti-anxiety medications to help with that. And then it's still, again, just, stimulating them, playing games with them, different things with like treats and things like that to kind of stimulate their, mind to chat, so they're constantly thinking, and that kind of helps with those types of things. But it's the same kind of deal with a dog with separation anxiety, doing things to just kind of adjust to their kind of decline in their, mental acuity, to kind of help them out. So, but that would be another big thing that we see in a lot of our older pets, especially. So, and they can get frustrating for people because, you come home and the dog shoot up the pillow or is peed on the floor, and you get upset, which is understandable. But at that point, the dog doesn't know why you're yelling at it. If you yell at it, all it knows is that you're yelling at it, and you're just increasing its anxiety too. So with dogs, it's really important not to. It's important that you want to use positive reinforcement for behaviors you want to see, not necessarily giving them any attention for behaviors that you don't want to see. So if they pee on the floor, you don't want to rub their face in it and say, "You're a bad dog." No, you want them to see you clean it up, and then you just ignore them for 15 minutes, because dogs, attention is attention to the dog a lot of times. And so they don't, especially puppies, don't distinguish between positive and negative attention, but the dog will distinguish between no attention and attention. So you don't want to give them any kind of attention for the bad behavior, but you want to give them positive attention for the behavior that you want them to do. So
a lot of great points and a lot to think about as we parent our fur babies, I guess, for lack of a better term, parent them and care for them, and to have a lot of communication with our veterinary care and our veterinary providers. And I love that we're able to get tips about how we can support our pets' resiliency and foster that, and foster the positive behaviors, and mitigate their stress. earlier you talked about how during COVID, the shelters emptied.
Mhm.
People were home and they had time and they wanted to bring pets into the home. And you mentioned about how these pets, whether they be older from a shelter or pups or kittens, haven't been socialized. Are there different strategies for those pets as we think about being home less often because they were socialized in a much different environment?
Yeah, that can be a little bit of a difficult situation because puppies, especially, that first 12 weeks of their life is kind of like that period where they learn a lot and imprint and their personality really forms and is set. And so for a puppy that wasn't well socialized during that period, it's just unfortunately going to be more predisposed to like fearfulness and anxiety. And that gets harder to kind of, it's one of those things where you can't go backwards in time and like hit the restart button now that the dog is 6 months or a year old and try to socialize, because some of those behaviors are ingrained. And so you just kind of have to take it kind of slow with those dogs, and slowly kind of socialize them and watch them very closely for signs of fear. So if the ears are pinned back, the tail is tucked, they're licking their lips, they get very still and the pupils dilate and they kind of have what we like to call like the wall eye, where you can see like the whites of the eye, like the crescent moon. That's a dog that is extremely fearful, and a dog that's acting like that can lash out and bite out of fear. And so you have to be careful with that. So it's doing things kind of on their schedule. So it's not like you want to go to the dog park and just let him go and he's going to make friends, and because he's probably going to get in a fight. So if you have friends or family members that have dogs, going on like play date and like walking the dogs around the neighborhood, and if your dog is acting a little off, making sure that there's space between the dogs so that he doesn't fear, he's not afraid that the other dog is going to come get him, but he gets used to their other dogs being around, and kind of slowly kind of extending that period, and then increasing closer contact and things like that. And the same thing with people coming to visit. Dogs can get territorial about their house, and all of a sudden these strangers are coming in and invading their space. So having the dog come outside and meet people outside where it's more on a neutral territory, making sure those people have like a treat, a high value treat that the dog really likes, have them give the treat. They sit still and let the dog come to them. You don't come up to the dog themselves and like come over to pet it, because a lot of times for a dog that is fearful like that, coming over the top of them to pet their head, that's an aggressive stance for them. Or trying to bend down and look in their face. Dogs don't like to make direct eye contact with us a whole lot. That's usually a sign of aggression between dogs when they make very direct eye contact. So you notice their look away from you. So you have to kind of be careful and kind of watch the cues that the dog is giving you. And if the tail is up and wagging and he's coming towards you, it's fine. But if that tail, he's still and that tail is kind of tucked, or those ears are a little bit back, that's a sign that dog has some anxiety, and we need to stop what we're doing and let him calm down and let him come to us. So those are some things you can do with those young dogs that didn't get well socialized. Sometimes medication can help temporarily with those guys to kind of lessen their anxiety, so you can get them in more social situations, and that would be something that you'd have to talk to your veterinarian about, as far as what the options are for your particular situation. There's different medications that we can use, some that you can use situationally and some that have to be given every day. It just kind of depends on the level of the anxiety for the dog. So
So it sounds like we have to be much more mindful about this leaving
Yeah.
our homes in the new routines if our animals have not yet been socialized because they came into our homes at a time when we were home. And
Yeah.
so there's going to be more to overcome.
Yeah. Those dogs, unfortunately, are just a little bit behind the eight ball in terms of their just social development because they didn't have that at the beginning, and it's hard to make up for that. And so you just really have to do things very slowly, working with a trainer that is certified for animal behaviors. There's a really good one that we send a lot of people to in the Brookville area that's really good with that kind of stuff. And it's just a labor intensive process on the owner's part. It takes a lot of work. But again, it's one of those things, if you don't deal with it at the beginning, is only going to get worse over time.
Okay. So, Dr. Starr, what do you think? I'm thinking maybe taking a break, sharing the
Okay.
PowerPoint, not a break as in we're leaving, sharing the slideshow of everybody's fur babies that they shared. And then we've had some questions come in the chat box. So maybe we watch the video, take some questions, and then maybe we wrap up with other high things you want to highlight as we go into summer.
Okay.
Maybe proceed that way. So
Okay.
I'm going to share my screen. And if I do this right, we will see all the adorable fur babies that were shared with us and shared with Mindy. So do we see the purple dog and cat? All right, and here we go. We had to give everybody last names so we knew who they belonged to. You'll see what I mean. So we have Azzy Bernstein, cutie. Bella Whalen, Bisque Finer, who also goes by Biscuit. Cha Cha. Look at Charlie. That face. Dookie. Huh? While Jane's not on the call, we have Ginger and Jasper Hochstein. Lola Goldberg. Jody Farris is not on, but those are her brat pack, she calls them. That's Looney Luna, if you ask Amy. Personality. It's amazing how much personality our fur babies have. And there's Simon Gordon. A lot of them have Jewish last names too, by the way. Sonny Moskowitz. Walter Bernstein. They are just so cute. We had the best time getting the pictures and getting to watch them and putting them together in a slideshow. Just a lot of fun and gave us big smiles. And actually, as you're asking questions, you can tell us one of your favorite things about your pet when we bring that up. So I saw Helene, you had put a question in. So Helene, if you want to unmute yourself, you are Simon Gordon's mommy. And you indicated that Simon has been clingy since COVID. If there are any suggestions as he follows you from room to room. So what's your favorite, what's a funny thing that Simon does or something you adore about Simon? And then we'll answer your question.
I guess when he was a little puppy, we'd like play peekaboo under the covers, you know, when I first got him. And that's his big thing before I said I'd never let a dog sleep in my bed, but I'm kind of didn't keep to my thing. But he's very lovable. But I've noticed since COVID, he's just a lot more clingier, you know. And Tara can vouch that when we have meetings, sometimes he has to be sitting on my lap while I'm Zooming a meeting. And he never used to be that much.
So any thoughts, Dr. Starr?
He might be one where, like, when you're gone and things, doing things with the T-shirt that you've worn, so that's something that that smells like you that he can have with him, or that might help. Um, the cleanliness at home, sometimes you can work on that by find a treat that he really likes. So we always want to reward what we want to see, and you want to use like um, a spare bedroom or the bathroom in where you can go around the corner where you can't see him. So put him in stay like in the hallway on the other side of the door frame, and you go around the corner where he can't see. And we want him to teach him to stay and be calm. And so you initially just do it for a few seconds, and then you pop and give him a treat if he did it. If he didn't, then you start over, and you just kind of slowly work that up by a few seconds each time. You make it as a game, so that he is getting something positive out of doing it. And you can eventually work that up to several minutes. And a lot of times that'll kind of help them in the long run say, well, I don't necessarily have to be where I can see my mom at all given times because she's still there. And sometimes that'll help with that cleanliness. But you always kind of want to make it a game with them so that they enjoy doing it. It's not something where it's like a chore where it's punished. So you find a treat that he really, really likes. He only gets that treat when you're playing that game, so that he knows, well, this is going to be something good. I'm going to get something good out of this. And that can help with some of that cleanliness with them over time. It is a bit labor intensive. It takes a long time to do because you're only working up a couple seconds at a time, because some dogs, they can't, like a second they can't see you, like the anxiety starts. So it's kind of a process, and it'll take you several weeks to kind of work up to a few minutes, but that may help in some regard. So
Is a Shih Tzu like a breed that is a clingy breed, or not necessarily?
necessarily consider them like a super clingy breed. They're a little bit of lap dogs, they tend to like want to be on your lap a lot. And so, but I wouldn't say that they're a breed that's like overrepresented as far as our patients that have like a lot of anxiety issues. So how old is he?
He's going to be 3.
Okay, so he's a pretty young guy. So, because if he's older guy, sometimes that might be a little bit of some cognitive decline that's causing some of that. But he's a pretty young guy. So, yeah, but I think as young as he is, if you kind of do that and make it a game out of it, that might help you a little bit. So,
Thank you.
sure.
So what are your thoughts about calming collars?
It's hit or miss. Some dogs and cats, they work really well. Cats hate collars, so usually for the cats, I'll recommend the plugins, the feel away plugins that you plug into the wall that emit the pheromones, and you put those in the rooms the cats spend the most amount of time in. Dogs, collars usually don't bother them too much because they're used to wearing them. For dogs that have mild anxiety, there'll probably be a little bit of benefit. For dogs that have severe anxiety, they probably won't do anything for. Same thing with some of like the herbal supplements. I know there's one called Composure that we use a lot. For mild anxiety, it can be quite beneficial. For severe anxiety, it probably won't do much of anything. So,
Thank you. Do others have questions that they didn't pop in the chat box that they want to unmute for and ask? Go ahead, Gail. You can unmute yourself.
So we have a rescue that's now 6 years old. We got her when she was about 3, and we moved during COVID. So we took a dog that wasn't really thrilled with men to begin with, and we moved in here, and we haven't had people in like a year or so. And so she's gotten very protective of her area, even the outside area. And she'll bark and bark and bark at anybody that comes near. I'm not sure. I mean, we've been trying to have some people start to come over now so that she gets used to it. But I have to tell them, don't make eye contact with her. Don't pay any attention to her. Ignore her. And then sometimes she'll come up to them, but other times she gets very aggressive towards men. And it seems to be strictly men. So we're not sure what happened in her previous adoption life.
Is she that way with your husband too?
Yeah, well, she didn't have a choice. She had to be nice to my husband because he feeds her. So she did make up with him. But
Okay, but like that initially,
yeah,
with
and
him,
right,
fearful of him.
yeah, right
Still,
away brought her
oh,
home. She had to make up with him. Yeah.
yeah. So a lot of dogs, I think, to deal with men, I I think a lot of people always assume that it's because the dog was abused by a man, and that's why they're fearful of men. I don't necessarily think it's so much that. I think men have much deeper voices, and they talk a little bit louder in general than most women, and they're bigger and more physically imposing. And so if you're a little dog and you've got a 200-pound guy coming around and he's yelling at the screen because his baseball team struck out or whatever, that's a little bit more fear inducing than someone like me with the pipsqueaky childlike voice that they don't really seem to be bothered by. And so with men, so you did the right thing that your husband is the one that feeds her. He should be the one that gives her like the most treats, which stinks for you, because but she's already attached to you. But having him do those positive things with her, that he takes her for most of the walks, will kind of help with that a little bit. Now, strangers coming into the house, that's the exact right thing. Don't make eye contact with her, because to her that's an aggressive nature. So a lot of times, like, if they're in the house, they just kind of sit and be calm and quiet and don't look at the dog. Having her go outside to meet them, and you can put a lawn chair out there where they're just sitting in the lawn chair with the treat, and letting her kind of slowly go up to them if she wants to. Now, she may not want to, and if she doesn't, don't try to force her to do it, because then we're just amping up that anxiety. So it's hard that's a hard thing when you have guests coming over that aren't over all the time. But if you have like some of a family member that comes a lot, having them help you work with her in that regard, so that she gets used to them, may help her with people that maybe aren't there as often over time. The other thing that she might benefit from, if it's situational anxiety when people come over, is to just use a mild anti-anxiety medication like trazodone that you can give her like a couple hours before you have guests, that just kind of takes the edge off for her, and making sure she has a space that she can go if she doesn't want to interact with anyone, that she can just go off and be by herself, and she doesn't have to interact with anyone if she doesn't want to. Because the more we try to force her to be sociable, the more we just create more anxiety. And dogs are just like people. Some of us are very sociable and some of us are not. So it just may be that that's just her personality. She's not going to be a super sociable dog, that she's imprinted and attached to you guys, and you're her people, and she just doesn't have use for anybody else. So but you did the right thing with having him feed her in that kind of thing. So I suspect it's more a case of just the deeper voice and things kind of scare her. So
So, Gail and Erwin, what's something that's fun or adorable about Sunny?
Good question. I don't know. It's really nice to come home and you have a dog greeting you there, all excited, and brings you a toy and wants to play as soon as you walk in the door. So it's nice to be greeted by somebody, you know. I guess that's what we like, you know. She runs and gets a toy to play right away. So
Her people are home.
yeah.
Thank you. Are there others with questions? So if not, then I'll ask a question. Janice, you shared a picture of Dookie. What's something that is fun or that you enjoy or adore about Dookie? We need you to, there you go.
He is just full of personality. I think what Gail said is true. When you come home, even though we're not going that many places, he's there to greet you, but he's got a wonderful personality. I feel like he understands so much, and I think he's just in tune with us. You know, it's like he also wants to be, you know, wherever his people are. And he also just came in second in the Ohio Basset Rescue calendar contest. So he won't be on the cover, but he will be on a month, and it raised a lot of money for Ohio Basset Rescue. So that was good.
He's a
He's a doll.
celebrity.
He's a celebrity. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm not going to call on people whose screens are blacked out because I don't want to put anybody on the spot. So if you are not showing yourself and you want to share, please feel free to come forth so we can see you and you can unmute. Stacy, do you want to say anything about your fur babies that you shared with us?
Well, Marley, the hound. When we first got Marley, Aleka brought him home from West Virginia, and he was never in a home, never disciplined, never potty trained. He was a throwaway hunting dog. And I never had a dog that took as much work. I now say there are hounds and there are dogs. But now that I've had him for 5 years, he just loves car rides. The minute he's in that car, the minute the ignition goes on, he barks. He didn't used to do that, but he just loves to bark out the window the entire ride. It's annoying, but it's hysterical. But that dog has more personality than I ever had in a dog. And it's interesting with the eye contact because he doesn't like when you stare at him, but he'll stare at you. You know, he will stare me down until it's impossible to ignore him. It cracks me up. He doesn't give up. Whereas the little one, he goes, well, I guess she's not going to give me what I want. I'll just whatever. But Marley, oh my God, he'll stare you down for an hour. So he's a hoot.
They are. They're a hoot. All of our fur babies are hoots. And as crazy as they drive us sometimes, we love them.
And my cats are as needy as the dogs. All of them. They're all different. They are needy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I just want to comment on something that she said earlier. So I've been involved with animal rescue for years, and one of the things that the rescue here we're involved with does, Dr. Stark, just kind of want your take on this, is whenever they have dogs meet, they never let the dogs go face to face. They always do dog to rear and like face to rear and vice versa, because they just don't know how the dogs are going to react. And that's something that we do with our dogs on walks. Like we're used to people like having the dogs off leash and they run up, and our dogs are great with other dogs. But there's always that one or two that we just don't know how they're going to be. So we always do the rear sniff, but to try to turn them around. Is that something you'd advise as well? You just don't know how they're going to react.
Yeah, I mean, his dogs, you know, that's a lot of how they greet each other in general, is sniffing each other's rear ends, because that's where their scent glands and things are. So yeah, anytime, you always want to make sure if there are two dogs meeting, you've got them on a leash so they can be pulled away, you know, if it happens. But a lot of times, you know, not having them get like right up on each other initially, having them kind of get used to each other from a distance, and then kind of slowly, and of course letting them you know, sniff each other and not be face to face. And certainly if anyone gets like that real still stance where they're just very like a statue, that's a dog that is primed to you know, react very badly, and so you want to kind of take the other dog away at that point too.
Thank you. Before I ask Dr. Starr if she has some hot topics she wants to share with us, in addition to some of the things we talked about today, if there's anything just to make sure we're mindful of, like going into summer? Are there any other questions? So Dr. Starr, as we go into summer, are there any things we should be really aware of and mindful of, just going into this hot season coming up?
Yeah, a couple things. With the hot weather coming up, heat stroke's always a big thing that we see a lot every summer. You don't realize how quickly dogs do not have sweat glands like we do, except on the pads of their feet. So the only way they blow off heat is by panting or sweating through the pads of their feet. They cannot sweat anywhere else. And so they are much more prone to developing heat stroke, especially double coated breeds like Huskies, because they have that extra coat of insulation. They are much more prone to getting heat stroke. And then the smushed face dogs, so pugs, Bostons, bulldogs, French bulldogs, Shih Tzus, Pekingese, all of those little kind of dogs with the smushed in faces, they are much more prone to heat stroke. And I am seeing pugs get heat stroke in 70-degree weather. So if you're a pug or a Boston or a bulldog, your natural state of being is difficulty breathing because everything is compressed into that little wrinkly face. They have a general hard time breathing just under normal circumstances. And so they can overheat very, very quickly. Signs of heat stroke, currently excessive panting, lethargy. They get really bright pink gums. They can vomit. They can have seizures if they get hot enough. But if you out walking your dog and it seems like it's panting a lot, like that tongue is really hanging out or it's kind of lagging behind, you need to stop and find a shaded area, carry water with you, and just let them rest. If it doesn't seem like the dog doesn't seem like it's getting better in a few minutes, then you should probably, take it in. The one mistake that people always make when their dog does get heat stroke is they want to dump it in cold water or pour cold water on the dog, which I understand the thinking behind, because you want to cool the dog down. You have to remember the dog can't sweat. And so when you have heat stroke, your peripheral circulation, so the vessels up near the skin are dilated, so that because the body's trying to blow off heat. And if we dump very cold water on the dog, we constrict those vessels. And so now you've actually made the problem worse because the core temperature is still very high, but we've constricted those vessels, so we're not getting heat transfer out of the body because we've constricted those vessels because the blood can't flow through. And by a lot of times they come to me and I'll take their temperature and it'll actually be normal or low, but because they've been dumped in cold water, it drops what I can check as a rectal temperature, but their core body temperature is still actually very high, and basically their organs are cooking. But it makes our job much harder because now we have a dog that basically is in shock because it's been dumped, had cold water poured on it, but we're still trying to get the core body temperature down without making the shock worse, if that makes sense. So you can, if you think your dog has heat stroke, certainly call your veterinarian, tell them, they'll tell you what to do. But the pads of the feet, you can put cool, not cold, but cool water on the pads of the feet, or rubbing alcohol will help pull heat off the pads. And then take like towels and just damp them down and then get them to your vet as soon as possible. That's always the big thing we see with that. With the heat strokes, is that's the mistake everybody makes. They dump them in cold water and it actually lessens their chance of survival by doing that. And then also walking burns on the pads of the feet. If it's 90 degrees outside, the ground temperature is about 140 degrees. So you think of dog pads feet, they're pretty tough and pretty thick, but they will still burn. And so if you can't comfortably lay the back of your hand on the pavement and hold it there for 5 seconds, then it's too hot for your dog to be walking on, because they will burn the pads of the feet and get thermal burns, and it'll slough off. And pad tissue is very specialized tissue, and it takes a long time to heal, like weeks and weeks. So, and that can be very painful. So always, walk in the morning when it's cooler, walk in the evening when it's cooler, or keep them on the grass and not on the concrete or the asphalt. And then, of course, fleas and ticks, always a concern in the summer. You make sure you've got a good flea preventative. Fleas are one of those things. It's much harder to prevent them than to get rid of them once you have them. So, and they're in your house. And then heartworm disease is always big. Heartworm, people always get confused about heartworm. They think it's just like intestinal worms. Heartworm it's in the blood vessels, so it's transmitted by mosquitoes. When the mosquito bites your dog, the worm larvae get in under the skin, they burrow into the blood vessels and then start to grow and then work their way up into the heart and the lungs. And then an adult heartworm can get to be about 1 foot long. So if you think you've got 50 of those in your lungs, in your heart, they clog everything up and can cause congestive heart failure. They can cause blood clots and sudden death. And it's one of those things. There is a treatment for heartworm, but it's very expensive and takes a while to work. And the longer those heartworms are in there, the more damage they cause. They can cause chronic inflammation in the small vessels and airways, which can cause chronic problems down the line. So it's, again, one of those things. It's much easier to treat, to prevent than it is to treat later on. So.
Wow. A lot of things to think about, and it's been a really informative session. We learned a lot about how to help our pets manage their behavior and how to care for them and with that process. And so if everybody could give a big round of applause for Dr. Starr, either jazz hands, you can do the clapping, you can clap, whatever that looks like for you. Thank you so much. We learned a lot, and we appreciate all of you being here with us today too. Another big thank you again to our JFS Advisory Board, to our program committee, and as well as the staff at JFS. None of this would happen without Aleka working behind the scenes. Mindy, a lot of you interacted with Mindy as you were signing up and sending your pet pictures. And so we are grateful to have them here and supporting everything that we do. We hope to see you at future events. We have a mitzvah mission coming up this Sunday for St. Vincent de Paul and for Hannah's Treasure Chest. And we'll send you information about that in the post link, the thank you, as well as we want to hear your stories about COVID. And we know that during COVID, our superpower was our resilience. And there were tough times. Some of us took on new things too. Some of us took on new pets. 2 sentences. What did you learn about yourself, or what did you do during COVID and the pandemic? And we'll send you that link too. And just share a little bit with us. And I think we've all learned a lot about ourselves over this time, as well as our fur babies. So thank you, everybody. Hope to see you again soon, and be safe. Thank you, Dr. Starr.
Oh, you're welcome. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much.
I think fabulous. I think a lot of great information.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank you. I think the interview format worked well. I think it was low key. I hope it worked well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Starr. You were not ever speaking to a group. You did a great job.
Fabulous job.
I mean, you really underestimated yourself when I talked to you, and it went really, really well.
Good.
Even Simon's under my chair listening.
That
So
familiar
maybe-
voice.
Really, so maybe, he heard what you said about clinging, so.
Yeah, try that doorway game. That works for a lot of them. It
Okay.
takes a while, but it might help you. So.
Okay, and we'll see you for his 3-year checkup. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you
Marianne
so
and Jack. We appreciate it. We love seeing the pictures of Azzy and Walter. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so
Thanks,
much, Dr.
Kira.
Stark. It was a
Bye-bye.
great session.
Okay, awesome.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
Care.
Pleasure.
Bye.